Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you. I believe we all share the common goal of ensuring that U.S. companies and farmers and ranchers are able to compete on a level global playing field without being subject to unfair trade practices by other countries. As a result of some of the attempts this administration has made to correct unfair trade, farmers and ranchers who depend on sending much of what they produce across our borders are living in an economic nightmare because their products have been targeted by retaliatory tariffs. I'm deeply concerned about the impact that today's retaliatory tariffs are having on U.S. agricultural products, especially considering that farmers and ranchers were already struggling with a weak ag economy before the tariffs were imposed and commodity prices dropped. My greatest concern is not only for the 2018 net farm income drop, but for the next year and succeeding years' losses due to lost global market share of our agricultural products, which may take years or decades to recapture. I know there's been some discussion already about the potential for bilateral trade agreements. I would ask you a question I've asked other members of the administration, because it seems to me at least that if you want to send a message to China, the best way to do that is to start doing business with their competitors. And, you know, under TPP, the tariff on beef, American beef going into Japan, was going to drop from 38% down to 9%. And I guess my question is there a possibility of rejoining the TPP? And if not, when can we expect negotiations to begin on a bilateral agreement with Japan, which is a substantial market for U.S. beef, among other things, as are many of the countries in that region that were a part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership? Mr. Dowd.
Senator, I think the answer to that, I don't know what the answer is on TPP other than I think the President has indicated clearly. When I was in the room at one point, he said, you know, I'd rather do a bilateral, I get a better deal. And I think economically speaking, theoretically speaking, he's exactly right. So your question is, how do we get that down the road with Japan? And the question is, we're having those conversations. We'll continue to have those conversations. I think the Vice President is working on that. Certainly my boss is working on that, and hopefully we can get there as quickly as possible. But your point is extremely valid. Other countries have beat us to the punch, and we've got to get busy.
Yeah, I mean, and I appreciate that, and I've heard that now for the last couple of years since we decided to pull out of TPP, that we're working on bilateral trade agreements, but I don't see any evidence that we are. Now, maybe there are discussions going on in a back channel way that are not visible to the rest of us, but it strikes me at least that these are huge missed opportunities from an economic standpoint, from a trading standpoint, not to mention the role that the U.S. plays in that region of the world, which has national security implications, among other things. So I'm just really frustrated. And obviously, with the state of play in agriculture today, where June 1st, soybeans were $10 a bushel. I was at an elevator in South Dakota 2 days ago, and they were $7.05 on the board. The basis, the transportation cost, continues to go up. And most of the farmers tell me that to break even, you're looking at, you need at least about $8 a bushel. And if you didn't forward contract, and some of ours did, but a lot of them didn't, they're having now to look at the prospect of storing a lot of their soybeans because this market is just shot for the moment. There are no bids coming in from the PNW, which is where 65% of our soybeans in South Dakota go. And so it's the concern and anxiety level is continuing to rise in farm country, and my impression is that it seems to fall on deaf ears around here. And with one, and I know that the MFP program is designed to try and provide some temporary relief, and perhaps it will. Again, it's just nothing more than a Band-Aid. We need to open up markets, but even the implementation of that, which I've expressed concerns about how that's being rolled out and how the formulas that are being used, they're using this year's production to make the payments to the soybean producers per bushel, when in fact there are a lot of areas in South Dakota, and I'm sure other areas of the country, where you had drought, you had floods, you don't have bushels this year. And we came up with several other ways that we think make more sense in terms of determining how those payments might be distributed, and suggested those to the Department of Agriculture, but those two were rejected. So just understand that these impacts are real. The economy in farm country continues to deteriorate. There will be more and more producers who are not going to be able to get operating loans next year and are going to be at risk of losing their operations. And it doesn't seem to me, at least, that message, as hard as we've tried, seems to be getting across to the administration. But we need bilateral trade agreements, or let's reopen the discussions with TPP. I'm still at a loss as to why that isn't something that's an option that's on the table. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.